Welcome to When We Were Young, a podcast series on Caribbean stories from long ago and the lessons we can learn from them today.
When times are tough, our initial response as human beings is towards self-preservation. Remember just a few months ago how impossible it was to lay hands on a pack of toilet paper? Exactly. But in all seriousness, in today's fast-paced, microwave-ready world, minor inconveniences and delays are seen as earth-shattering, day-wrecking events. In our rush to get to the next appointment, business meeting, class, lunch date, or worship service, we sometimes forget to pause, observe those around us, seeing beyond the I'm okays and the I'm fines when we ask, how are you doing today? A few days ago, I had the honor of speaking with Miss Gloria Graham, affectionately called Mother Graham by many, and Gigi by her eldest granddaughter. We talked about everything from her experience growing up in the Caribbean, the devastation of Hurricane Hugo, a Category 5 storm that ripped through the Virgin Islands in 1989, and the love and support of 3 special women who helped her make it through very challenging seasons in her life. I'm your host, Irma Graham, and welcome to another episode of When We Were Young.
My name is Gloria Graham. I was born on the island of Grenada, and at the age of 19, I migrated to St. Croix, Virgin Islands, where I got married and started a life. I have 8 children, 5 girls and 3 boys. My husband died and I was left with my small children, and I thank God that the Lord really took care of us during those times. My parents had 13 children, and I'm the number 6 of them, and having a big family, we always have things to do. My fondest memory as growing up as a child in the Caribbean, in Grenada, we didn't have all these technical things as phone and so on. So we make things with hands and play. We would play marble. We would play top. We make our own top. The things that they call today as the blade. It is is the top that we spin with the cord. And these things, it just brings back such joy to us to know that we had to invent our own, and make fun. I enjoy going in the garden with my father always, as he was a gardener. He would plant, and when time to harvest, we would have to go even twice a week to the mountain to harvest the tomato or the cucumbers and things. And if we don't go up as often, the cucumbers will get ripe, and we would lose a lot of our produce. But I enjoy doing that.
Wisdom of the ages are often passed from one generation to the next through proverbs, short sayings that state general cross-cultural truths or pieces of advice. Let's listen in as Miss Gloria shares with us her favorite Caribbean proverb.
We have a saying back home in Grenada is that you have cocoa outside, so you have to look out for rain. Well, I always look at that. I say, I have children. I have 8 children. They are all over the United States and so on. So I always listen to the news to hear what's going on, so I could inform them, let them know, this is what and what, So that is what I say. Well, I have cocoa outside. I have children out there. So we have to look out for rain. We have to look out for what is going on around them, because they can be aware of what is going on so that they can be protected.
Wow. What a great reminder that we must look out for and protect the vulnerable. As we continue through the telephone interview, I started seeing common themes of selflessness and generosity in Miss Gloria's story. Let's take a listen.
I learned from my parents, especially my mom. She was always a praying mother. She's always a giving. She always gave of herself, And I learned from her that you have to sometimes deny yourself and in order to help others. And I think throughout my life, I have got some of what she had to offer by encouraging us to do good, be kind to one another, love, share, give. I remember, and as I say, to share and give. My mother always giving. Nothing is too small or too big for her to give. I remember when we we had the land up in the mountains, and Daddy would cultivate the land, so we would have the banana, the breadfruit, the yams we would dig. So when we go up in the mountain, we would bring down a lot of the produce. And the minute we come to the house, I see Mommy, she would take some bags and she start parceling them out. Some in this one, some in this one, some in this one. And she would send us, go carry this for this neighbor, carry this for this neighbor, carry this for this neighbor. And she had that in her that she feel like everybody should have. As long as she have, others have. So I learned this from her, and I think I got some of that too, because I realized that if we have and we eat it for ourselves, it will finish. But if we give somebody else something, they would have to eat and to give God thanks too. And I say this because I remember after I came up here to St. Croix and my husband passed away and everything like that, you become in a little tight situation, the needs and so on. But I used to I learned how to bake bread and so on. So whenever I bake bread, I would give the children, go carry this one for the neighbor, carry this one for the neighbor. And it is such a joy to hear them say, oh, Miss Graham, that came just in time. And one thing I regret in my life, one day I remember my husband got some milk, fresh milk from the farm. Somebody gave him some milk. And, having the small children, I was so happy that I had the milk that I could give the children and so on. So I just kept all that milk for myself and the children. But before long, the milk spoiled. A good amount of the milk sour. And I feel so bad. Up to today, I talk about it. I say if I had give some of that milk to the neighbors, everybody would have enjoyed. But look, I had to throw some away. So don't try to keep everything for yourself. Share. So I learned anything I have, it's not too much to give. Give a little. It may be a small amount, but you never know what the person that you are giving to it, how it's a blessing to them. And I remember one neighbor of mine, her name was Ivy Tyson. He was such a good neighbor. There is nothing. We live there in that neighborhood for just next door. I on that side and she on the other side of the street. And I remember the husband used to look at us. He said, look at them. That one go and that one come. Every minute, this one go over with something and that one come over with something. So we live, that's how we're supposed to live as neighbors, as friends, caring for one another. I remember when I have those children and they might be out in the street playing, and you see she would point that finger. She was a teacher, and she was going, get back in the yard. get back in the yard. And you see all of them just camp back in the yard. I tell you, I just love her. I love that neighbor, Miss Tyson. And after I left St. Croix, I spent a few years up in the United States in Philadelphia. And during that time, she took sick, wanting to come back home to visit her. I did not make it back in time, but she passed. But I came home for the funeral service. And at that funeral, I just had to say, she was like a Dorcas to me. Look what she did. And I keep telling everybody, telling them in the funeral, she did this. She cooked the fungi and fish, and she cooked the pot of soup, the lentils, and she bring it over. She do on every little thing. I learned for her, for the matter, I learned how to make fungi from her. She was such a beautiful, beautiful lady. Nothing is too small or too big to give to me. Every day she would come and she would bring something over. And one day I remember she sent over a paper bag with something in it with her grandchild. And when she handed the paper bag to me, in that little bag was a joint of cane, few peanuts, and a piece of coconut. And she said, share this, give this to the children. They can munch on it. And when I see that, it's like the tears roll down my face to see how she would think, the simple little thing that she said, in other words, she said, my children can eat it, yours can eat it too. And I always keep this in mind and share it with my children. Nothing is too small or too big to give. When you give, others have been blessed. And you feel good about it too. So I remember too, after my children went off to school, they used to call back and ask, Mommy, what did the neighbor bring over? Because they look forward for she bringing something for us. And she has gone on to glory, but her name keeps ringing in our mouth very often. She was really a figure that I admire. I can tell anyone, wherever I go, I could tell them about how neighbors should live, you know. And she was that example of a good neighbor. I have encountered a very special person, especially after the death of my husband. I never knew her before, but when she came to me, and she was the nurse at the hospital, and her name is Annie Day Henry. She has taken me and family as her very own. She told me one day after my husband passed that he asked her to look out for his wife and the children. And she said to me, she said, I am going to honor the request of a dying man. And she came to me and she said, I'm going to be there for you and the children. She promised him that she's going to do it, and she did. And from that moment, we call her Auntie Henry. I even call her Auntie Henry, you know. The children call her Auntie Henry. I remember the first Christmas after my husband died. That was the best Christmas we ever had. We never knew anything about our Christmas tree. But she brought a big Christmas. The Christmas tree was touching the roof of the little house. She brought toys. I remember one of my little boys said, I want a big toy. So when she bring the boxes with toys and everything, I hid them. And the night before Christmas, I took them out and I put them under the tree. And when that child got up the morning and he looked under the tree, And he see the biggest toy was under there. It was a truck that she had given to me. He just went to the biggest toy because that's what he asked. He didn't want to know what was in it. He said, I want a big toy. And he was the happiest child in our neighborhood. He flip and he laugh and he jump and he skip around because he got the big toy that he wanted. Auntie Henry has been there for us. She brought clothes when we did not have clothes. She brought shoes. I remember after my husband passed away and I told my children, I said, who is your daddy now? They said, Jesus. I said, ask him for what you want. And this child said, Mommy, the shoes I have is the one I go to school with and I go to church. It has holes in it. I said, well, ask your daddy for shoes and whatever you need. And each child asked for what they need. This one said, I need a shoes, I need clothes. The other one said, I need dresses. Whatever the children asked for, that was brought in by Auntie Henry. She brought dresses, she brought shoes, she brought clothes, she brought everything. She just kept bringing boxes and bringing boxes. And when the children opened it, that was the joy of their life. I myself sharing that blessings in such a great way that people could not even make me out. She brought clothes for me when I did not have. When I walk out the street after I put on the clothes that she brought for me, people didn't know it was Miss Graham. I passed by a neighbor walking up the street, and I said good morning to her, and she was wondering, who is this? Then she said, is this Miss Graham? I said, yes. She said, you look so different. Because the clothes I was wearing, the difference that this Auntie Henry brought into my life and in the life of my children. So she is one of those I cherish very much, along with Miss Tyson. I will never forget her. Will never forget Miss Tyson because they have showed me love.
Mrs. Tyson and Auntie Henry were exemplary neighbors. Won't you agree? There were many, many others who were great neighbors to Miss Gloria. However, there was one more woman that went above and beyond the call of duty. This warrior princess, I'd like to refer to her as, was not only instrumental in saving the lives of Miss Gloria and her small children, but also helped shape her into the woman she is today.
Well, I knew her to be a evangelist, or she was a pastor, and on top of that, I got to know her more when she was a baker. She and Sister Jenny used to bake and then go around and deliver the bread to the different people and so on. My sister Jules, she knew her too. So one day when we really plugged in with her, I remember one day I was at home and Sister Jenny lived not very far from where I live, and they were in the area delivering bread, and it was late. But they had a lot of bread left over. So Sister Jenny came and knocked at my door and asked if I would like to have some of those bread. And in those days, they used to make those big, they call it butter bread. So she gave me a few loaves of those butter bread, and that was such a great blessing. So from that day, I appreciate her for doing that. I was so thankful to God that the Lord sent her my way, and what a blessing the bread was, not only to me, but to others, because I was able to share even a loaf or so with my neighbor and so on. So from then, she realized that, well, with me and having all those little children, anytime she have bread left over from the day, she would send some home with Sister Jenny when she coming down. I remember the day when Hugo was about to strike St. Croix, that she came down to William Delight where we live, and she said, Graham, I understand it's a very serious storm coming and we have to move. I don't want you all to stay there. So I said to her, I said, well, okay, she came down with the bus and I said, well, we just pulled a few little things and we jumped in the van and we went up to her house. And it was a blessing that she came because the storm was a devastating storm. And we had to stay by her house for nearly a year, over a year. We had to stay by her home until my home was restored. So it was such a blessing that she came and she was very persistent that we have to move right now in haste. So before we could even reach to her house, the storm was started coming, the wind and the rain and everything started. So we moved out just in time. After the hurricane, we could not go down to our house. Not until maybe it was about in 2 weeks' time, I think we really was able to go back because the place was so devastated. No roads, you can't drive, everything was shut down. So I think it was about in 2 weeks' time I was able to go down. And I go driving down in the truck or whatever we used to go, try to make our way down to see, well, what went on, in my neighborhood. And it was like you in a strange land. You can't even figure out where you are. The devastation was so terrible. The place was like parched. You can't imagine. But when I reached home to where my house was, and I looked, and I didn't see anything, all we could have said, gone with the wind. Everything was gone. Everything was flat, blown away. The house flat down, nothing. Everything left. Every galvanized wood, everything. Only the base of the flooring that remained. And all I said, God, I thank you. Because if we had stayed, our life would have been gone too. But I thank God that Pastor Linda was persistent to come and get us and take us up to her house. She was one that used to be on the street all over the night. She would take in the homeless in her house. She would cook and give them food and clean them up, clothes and everything. She was always a warrior, always fighting, always doing something, looking out for the wounded, looking out for the hurting ones. That's the type of spirit she had.
I gleaned so many important lessons from my brief interview with Miss Gloria. First, I learned that to be a good neighbor, you must be willing to see the needs around you and have the courage to act even when it's inconvenient. I also learned that generosity and selflessness helps build strong communities by ensuring no one is left behind. Through God's grace and the kindness of strangers who eventually turned into lifelong friends, Miss Gloria and her family were able to overcome great odds. And lastly, when it comes to teaching children the importance of sharing and being kind, demonstrating those values oneself speaks more loudly than words ever could. Before we close out this episode, I want to send a very special thank you to our podcast guest, Miss Gloria, who happens to be my mother and the mother of my sister, Udall Caribbean's founder, Ephra Graham. Miss Gloria, thank you for sharing your story, our story today. This has been another episode of When We Were Young. Thank you for joining us, and until next time, be well.
This has been When We Were Young, a podcast series on Caribbean stories from long ago and the lessons we can learn from them today. For more information about this series, visit us at udallcaribbean.com.